The neighbor who buried something every night. The first time Caleb saw him digging, it was just after 2:00 a.m. The glow from the neighbor's porch light cast long yellow lines across the grass. The man's silhouette moved slowly, methodically, like someone following steps from memory, not thought. Same shovel, same pace, same corner of the backyard. Caleb squinted through the blinds, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button. But he didn't press it. Maybe it was just landscaping. Maybe insomnia. Maybe grief. But the next night, the man dug again. Same spot. And the next night, and the next. On the 5th night, Caleb opened his window to listen. The sound wasn't quite what he expected. Not metal scraping rock, not roots snapping. It was soft, wet, like digging into something that wasn't ready to be buried. And beneath the shovel, occasionally a sound. Brief, like breath, or whisper. Caleb leaned closer. The man stopped. Not abruptly, just paused, like he'd heard Caleb listening. And without turning, without speaking, he slowly lifted one hand and waved, not toward the sky, toward Caleb's window. The next morning, Caleb checked the yard. From behind the fence, he could barely make out the soil freshly turned, damp, and still darker than it should have been. No tools left behind, no mess, but the ground pulsed faintly with heat when he held his hand over it. He didn't dare touch it. That night, he didn't sleep. The digging started again at 2:08 a.m. On the 8th night, something changed. Caleb heard a second sound, not from the neighbor, from under his own floorboards. A soft, steady tapping, like fingers brushing wood. And when he got out of bed and crept toward the noise, it stopped. But there, on the floor by his bed, was a single footprint in dust. Not his. It was barefoot, facing the window. He opened the blinds. The neighbor stood still now, not digging, just watching. And the shovel, it was planted in the earth, upright, waiting. On the 9th night, Caleb stepped outside. He waited until the digging started soft, rhythmic, deliberate, then slipped on his shoes, hoodie zipped to the neck, flashlight off. The grass was cold beneath his feet. The air thick, like the sky had sunk closer to the ground. He moved quietly, sticking to the shadows, toward the back corner of his yard, where the chain-link fence met the darkness. Across the divide, the neighbor worked, back bent, one slow scoop after another. He never looked up. Caleb crouched low. He watched as the man paused, reached into the hole, and pulled out something. Not dirt, not roots, but cloth, stained, dark, heavy with moisture. He unfolded it like ritual, shaking it gently in the windless air. Inside was something small, a bundle, wrapped tight in twine. And then, the man whispered to it. 2 words, too quiet to catch, then placed it gently back into the earth, like he was tucking in a child. Caleb's breath caught. He raised his phone, but the screen flickered. Static lines. Recording disabled. Battery 0%. He checked it before leaving. It was full. He looked up. The neighbor was staring at him. Not in surprise. In recognition. Like he'd been expecting this. He said nothing, just pointed at the ground between them. At a 3rd hole, shallow, open, fresh. Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe. The next day, there was no sign of digging. The grass was flat, unmarked. But when Caleb stepped outside, he saw something leaning against his back door. The shovel, same as the neighbor's. Same markings, same blackened wood handle. Taped to it was a note, 1 line. Scrawled in earth-dark ink, "Tonight it's your turn." That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen, staring at the shovel, waiting. The clock ticked to 2:08 a.m. And somewhere outside, the earth shifted, not dug, moved, and the sound returned, soft, wet, whispering, calling him out. The sky was too quiet at 2:08 a.m. No wind, no insects. Even the trees stood still like they were listening. Caleb stepped into the yard with the shovel in hand. The handle felt too warm, the metal edge already dirty. He didn't remember using it, but his fingers gripped it like they'd done this before. He walked to the fence line, the spot where the third hole had been. Now, it was gone. No depression, no mound, but the earth sank when he stepped on it. Soft, like memory foam, like it wanted to open again. He raised the shovel, drove it in. The soil moved too easily, too fast, like it wasn't resisting, it was letting him in. After the third scoop, he hit something. Not rock, not wood, plastic. He knelt, brushing the dirt away with trembling hands. It was a tape recorder. Old, black, still running, no buttons, just a red light blinking slowly. He lifted it. The tape crackled, and then he heard his own voice, breathing, speaking. "It's Caleb. Night 13. I dug again. It's deeper now. He watches but never stops me. I don't know what I buried. I don't remember doing it, but it keeps coming back. And every time I dig, I find myself closer to it." The voice ends in static. Then, silence. Then, another voice. Not his. Older. Gravel in the throat. Calm. The neighbor. "Don't let it go too long without being fed. It remembers names. It doesn't like to be forgotten." Caleb dropped the recorder. The red light blinked once more, then off. He looked up. Across the fence, the neighbor stood still. No shovel, no motion, only watching. At his feet, 5 mounds of dirt, all the same size, all the same shape. And now, one more was open. Empty, waiting. Back inside, Caleb found mud on his bedroom floor. A trail, leading from the window to his bed. And on the sheets pressed into the fabric, a perfect handprint. Small, bare, facing upward. The mud trail didn't dry. Hours passed. Sunlight touched the window. Birds returned. But the handprint on Caleb's bedsheets stayed wet, fresh, like it had just been made. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. He kept hearing the tape recorder in his head. "I don't know what I buried, but it keeps coming back." That morning, he stood on his porch, staring at the neighbor's yard. Nothing moved, but the grass looked different. Longer, like it had grown overnight, but only in rows. Thin, even rows that marked the outlines of graves, 6 of them now. Caleb called the police, filed a noise complaint, said there was suspicious activity. They showed up at noon. The neighbor was outside, watering plants, smiling, polite. No holes, no shovel, no trace. When Caleb asked if they checked the ground, one officer just laughed. "He's got the nicest lawn on the street." That night, Caleb stayed up. No lights, no phone, only the recorder in his hand. He hadn't turned it on since the digging. But now, without touching it, the red light blinked again. New voice, his. "Night 21. Still digging. I don't remember when I started. But the holes aren't staying filled. I buried something that moves." 2. 8 a.m. The sound returned, not from outside, from beneath the house. Same slow digging, same soft breath. Only now, it was layered. Multiple sets of hands. He pressed his ear to the floorboards. There were too many sounds. Claws, fingers, whispers, and voices repeating his name. Caleb, Caleb, Caleb. Not threatening, begging. He ran outside. The neighbor was already standing in his yard, shovel in the ground, both hands resting on it, eyes locked on Caleb. He spoke for the first time. Soft, calm, hollow. It never wanted to be buried. None of them did. You can't put memory in the ground and expect it not to grow. Behind him, one of the mounds breathed. The dirt shifted, sank inward, then lifted, like something below was turning over. A hand broke through the topsoil, tiny, thin, pale. The next night, The digging didn't start at 2:08. It started at 1:59. Caleb was already awake. He didn't plan to go outside, but the sound was closer now inside the walls. Like whatever had been buried was moving horizontally, not up, not down, toward him. At 2:03 a.m., the porch light across the yard turned on. The neighbor stood there, still, calm. He didn't speak, just motioned once, a slow, deliberate sweep of his hand, inviting Caleb to come over, and this time, he did. The fence door opened before Caleb touched it. The neighbor didn't look surprised. He was already walking around the house, to the far corner of the yard, where the grass was darker, thicker. The neighbor knelt down beside a patch of untouched earth. There was no shovel. He dug with his hands, fast, precise, not like he was uncovering something, like he knew exactly where it was. And then, gently, he pulled it free. It was a photo album, caked in dirt, wrapped in plastic. He handed it to Caleb without a word. Inside were pictures, dozens of them, old, faded yet unweathered. Every one of them was of Caleb, sleeping, walking, staring out windows, dates scribbled beneath, times, some labeled Test A, others Burial 3, Return 5, and then on the last page, a Polaroid. Fresh, still developing. It was of Caleb standing right there, holding the album, mouth open in horror. In the background, the neighbor, smiling, looking directly at the camera. Caleb dropped the book. The neighbor spoke softly. They're not dead, just misplaced. The ground keeps trying to return them, but memory's messy. Sometimes the faces come back wrong. He pointed toward the row of graves. Now there were 7, and the newest one was still moving. The dirt pulsed, and then something sat up. Not crawled, sat. Slowly, with purpose. It had a face, wrong, twisted, mouth too wide, skin like wet canvas stretched thin. But Caleb knew it. He knew it, because it was his. It didn't speak. The thing with Caleb's face. It just sat there in the dirt, chest rising and falling like breath remembered how to return. Head tilted, blank eyes locked on him. Not angry, not in pain, just waiting. The neighbor stepped back, letting Caleb stand alone. Sometimes, he said softly, the ground gives back what it can't digest. Caleb stumbled. This isn't me. It's what's left of you, the neighbor replied. One of many. The thing stood. It moved awkwardly, like joints weren't placed right. It smiled, but the mouth didn't close. Too wide, too still, and it began to walk not toward Caleb, but around him, circling. The ground throbbed with each step, soft dirt collapsing slightly underfoot, like it recognized its own. Then it stopped, pointed at the shovel leaning against the fence. Its mouth moved, but the sound came from the recorder still in Caleb's pocket. You buried me wrong. Now you have to do it right. Caleb backed away. No, you're not real. I didn't bury. The neighbor cut him off. You don't remember. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. He pointed to the far end of the yard. There, 5 more figures now stood, all different, but all familiar. Versions of Caleb at different ages, some with sunken eyes, one missing an arm, one crying silently, another digging already. And in the center of the yard, a hole was forming on its own. No hands, just earth parting like it wanted something inside. The neighbor looked at him one last time, then turned and walked into his house. Didn't say goodbye, didn't close the door. Caleb stood alone, the shovel at his feet, the thing with his face just watching, and the hole waiting. He lifted the tool, hands shaking, stepped toward the opening, but the ground pulsed once and closed, refused him, refused the others, and from behind him the tape recorder hissed again. You can't bury what never stopped living. You can only trade it. The air turned cold. The figures stepped closer, and the last thing Caleb saw before everything went black was one of them, one with his exact eyes, crawling toward his open door. Morning never came. The sun tried. It pushed faint orange across the sky, but it never touched Caleb's house. Inside, the rooms were quiet, still, cold. The front door stood open. Mud tracked across the floor in soft, uneven prints. The same barefoot shape, over and over, circling through the kitchen, across the hallway, down the stairs. The bedroom door creaked. Something had curled up on the mattress, breathing, but wrong. Too slow, too shallow. Like lungs remembering how to move after being underground too long. Across the street, the neighbor stood by the window. No more shovel, no more dirt. His yard was clean now. Flat, empty. He didn't dig anymore. He didn't have to. Someone else did. That night, at exactly 8 a.m., the first sound echoed again. A shovel hitting soft earth. Not in the neighbor's yard, in Caleb's. Steady, rhythmic, almost practiced. If anyone had watched, and no one did, they would have seen a figure kneeling by the back fence, digging, patient. Each night, a new spot. Each morning, no evidence. Only the faintest shift in the grass, and sometimes, footprints leading out of the yard. Not in, out. Weeks passed. The lights in Caleb's house stopped turning on. Mail stacked at the door. Windows fogged. But at 8 a.m. every night, the sound continued. And if you got close enough to the fence, you'd hear it clearly. Breathing. Not his. The ground's. Waiting. One night, a new sound joined it. Footsteps. Crunching leaves. A voice. Tired. Curious. A new neighbor just moved in 2 houses down. Leaning on the fence, watching the dark shape digging, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button, and the shape in the yard stopped digging, slowly turned, raised one hand, and waved.